mountain castles. There's something awe-inspiring about looking up at a man-made structure, towering above you, carved into the cliffs. It's the interplay between terrain and architecture, where the land and the build merge into one seamless form. The more I've worked on castles, the more I've gravitated towards using the existing terrain rather than fighting against it. In some of my earlier creations, I wasn't quite satisfied with what the game was providing, so I often felt the need to terraform. But over time, I've come to embrace the natural terrain and learning how to let it guide the build instead of resisting it. And that shift has benefited my process in more ways than one. In this quick guide video, I'll walk you through my approach to building castles and how Minecraft's natural terrain can support, not hinder your creative direction. In the last guide video, I talked about how pillars often serve as the controlling force in my builds, how they shape the rhythm and structure of large-scale architecture. And that idea directly flows into this one, where towers become the guiding force in my castle designs. If you haven't seen that video yet, I highly recommend checking it out. And be sure to stick around until the end of the video, where I'll be revealing the next tutorial series. Also, I recently launched a Discord server called Sixcord, a space where you can ask for help with building, share your own creations, and connect with a growing community of creative, passionate builders. We have an awesome community over there with lots of great people. I would love to see you there. Before we dive in, remember, this video reflects my approach to building castles. It's not the only way of doing it, and it might not even be what works best for you. And I'm in no way saying that you shouldn't terraform at all, really. You can create amazing stuff by sculpturing the terrain, so don't let this video hold you back if that's what you want to do. This video is specifically about using the existing terrain as a guide to shape your creations. And I think that's the beauty of Minecraft and creative projects in general. We all have to find the approach that suits us best. So take whatever works for you from this video and don't force anything that doesn't feel natural to your style of building. One of the common threads that run through all my builds is the silhouette. I treat the overall shape as one of the most important elements of any design, really. Often even more important than the fine details. Of course, this can vary a lot from project to project, but I almost always begin with the most basic shapes and build from there. That's why rough sketching has become such a valuable part of my process. It's useful for any kind of build, really, but especially when designing castles, I find. And this is where the terrain comes into play. I usually generate random seeds in creative mode and just explore by flying around, getting a feel for the lay of the land. There's so much untapped potential in Minecraft's terrain. I get so much inspiration by just exploring what the game naturally creates, and then I always end up saving so many seeds or worlds for later. Once I find a location that sparks an idea, I take screenshots and load up Photoshop. From there, I begin sketching simple shapes over the landscape, not detailed drawings, just quick silhouettes to block out the major forms or shapes. That's exactly how I designed the overarching structure of my recent project, Utgard. This approach is incredibly helpful. In just a minute or two, I can sketch out an idea and quickly get a sense of whether it's going to work. Sometimes just adding a bit of shadow to the sketch is enough to let me visualize the final build. Working with the terrain also forces certain creative decisions. In my video, Thinking Inside the Box, I talked about decision paralysis and how having too many choices can actually hold you back. Letting the terrain guide you narrows the field, it simplifies the process and gives you direction. And sometimes that's all it takes to unlock a design that might not have come to you otherwise. Once I have a silhouette in mind for a project, something I believe can work, I start planning out the rough shapes in-game. Using the existing terrain and my sketch as a reference, I begin placing basic volumes to block out the build. This is where another key part of my design process comes in. Just as pillars guide the structure of my cathedral-style builds, towers serve as the guiding principle for my castles. To put it simply, I tend to design the towers first, then connect them with walls, rather than starting with the walls and then filling in the rest. That also means that towers naturally become the dominant forms in the composition, so to speak, not the walls, and I prefer it that way. Not only does it create stronger silhouettes, but it also makes the build easier to manage and plan, in my opinion. And when it comes to planning, I use the sketch as a basis and then simply study the terrain to find any sharp edges along the cliffs that can be extended into towers. And then I basically let the terrain dictate the size and width of the towers. If there isn't enough terrain to support a large structure, I might bridge the gap or add supporting pillars. But generally, sticking to the terrain in one way or another has proven to be a really useful tool for me. At this stage, I really haven't touched on the functionality of the castle itself. And that's a really big topic, and not something I'll go deeply into in this video. As I mentioned, the focus here is on how to come up with interesting shapes by letting the terrain guide your designs. Of course, depending on the type of castle you're building, the layout and functionality in general can vary greatly. Here are a few fundamental ideas to keep in mind while you plan the build. One of the core reasons to build a castle on top of a mountain, aside from how epic it looks, is the general defense. It's meant to be secure against a potential siege. Keeping that in mind as you design your towers and walls helps anchor your build in a bit of grounded realism. Even if you're building in a fantasy style, a sense of purpose behind the structure always adds strength to the final result. You probably heard of the modern Bailey designs in general castle designs, if you ever read anything about medieval castles. When it comes to mountain castles, the mountain itself is essentially the mud, and placing the keep at the top is a strong starting point. If you're building let's say a monastery, the keep would probably be a cathedral or the main place of worship in this context. But more generally, we are talking about the largest and most important structure in the build, regardless of the castle's specific function. On the other hand, the Bailey functions as a buffer area you will have to cross to get to the keep, and it needs to be secured too. For me, a really helpful approach is to plan a route that the entire castle is designed around. A clear path for how the castle is entered. And from there I add baileys with gates wherever it makes sense, based on the terrain I'm working with. Designing a route from the base of the mountain all the way up to the tallest tower helps give structure and context to the rest of the build. It grounds the layout in a sense of functionality. And I don't know, it kind of almost gives a feeling of level design to the build, where the path itself isn't necessarily a straight line. There are of course countless factors to consider here, but a great place to start is with your watchtowers. From there you can add elements like houses, barracks and other functionalities. As for detailing the builds, that's out of the scope of this video, but I will say this, your initial sketch can still be really useful here. Try pushing the sketch a bit further by adding simple details and a touch of color maybe. I usually stick with a minimalist palette, one main color for the walls and one for the roofs. Once that's established, you can layer in the texture and add colors later on. You might prefer a lot of color variation. I tend to keep it more simple. There's no right or wrong answer here. Many different combinations can work. It really comes down to your style and what you want the build to feel like. The architecture and detailing are where most of the real work actually is going to happen. And that's where I'll encourage you to check out some of my tutorials. You don't have to follow an entire series. Instead, try finding parts of a build that inspire you. It could be a tower, a window design, or a castle wall. And maybe you can try and adapt those elements into your own creations. Since this video is about castles, it felt natural to make the next tutorial about the monastery. While technically not a castle, more importantly, it illustrates many of the concepts I've discussed in this video. And it's actually the oldest castle style build I've made that still doesn't have a tutorial yet. So yeah, that's gonna be exciting. The monastery is a build that's largely designed around its towers, and in the tutorial I'll walk you through how to build each one of them, whether you're working in the original seed or placing them in your own world. So stay tuned for that, and I really hope this video will help you get started on your own castle designs. I'd love to see what you're building, so feel free to stop by my Discord and share your creations. And if you'd like to support my work, become a Patreon supporter or YouTube member. It really helps to keep me going. Thank you all so much. I'll see you in the upcoming tutorial series. Bye guys.